The first time I knew something was wrong, I was standing in our kitchen watching my wife of 8 years dry her hands on a towel that no longer belonged to the woman I married. Megan had this particular way of doing things, these small rituals that made her Megan. She'd dry her hands twice, fold the towel, hang it on the exact same hook. But that Tuesday evening, she just tossed it onto the counter and walked away, her fingers already reaching for her phone before she even left the room. I'm Alex Rhodes, and I used to make my living reading people. 5 years in military intelligence will teach you that every human being is a walking collection of patterns, and when those patterns break, something shifted in their world. The problem with being trained to notice these things is you can't turn it off, even when you desperately want to believe everything's fine. That evening, Megan smelled wrong. Not bad, just wrong. There was this cloying sweetness clinging to her blazer, something expensive and floral that she'd never wear. When I mentioned it, she laughed that new laugh she'd developed lately, the one that sounded like breaking glass trying to pretend it's music. "Oh, that's probably from Sandra in accounting. She's one of those huggers, you know? Practically attacked me at the elevator." I nodded, smiled, and filed it away in the part of my brain that still worked like a threat assessment computer. One data point means nothing. 2 data points suggest a possibility. 3 data points form a pattern. I was already at 5. The phone thing started about 6 weeks before the perfume incident. Megan used to leave her phone everywhere. On the arm of the couch, the bathroom counter, the kitchen table, wherever she last set it down. It drove me crazy in a fond, married couple kind of way. I'd find it under magazines or buried in the couch cushions and bring it to her, and she'd kiss my cheek and call me her phone-finding bloodhound. But then she started keeping it in her pocket. Always, even at home, even when she was just walking from the living room to the bedroom. And when she did set it down, it was always face down, screen pressed against whatever surface like it was hiding something, which of course it was. The laugh changed too. Megan had this genuine, full-throated laugh that made her whole face light up. I'd spend my whole day trying to earn that laugh, building up stories from work or remembering funny things just to see that expression. But lately when she looked at her phone, this other laugh would come out. Louder, sharper, performative. The kind of laugh that's designed to convince someone on the other end of a text message that you're having the time of your life. I'd come up behind her while she was cooking or folding laundry and she'd flinch. Actually flinch, like I'd caught her stealing something. "Sorry," she'd say. "You startled me." But I moved like I always move. She knew the sound of my footsteps on our hardwood. Floors better than she knew her own. What had changed wasn't how I moved. It was what she was doing when I moved. We lived in Ashwood, Colorado, a town so postcard perfect it almost felt like someone had built it as a movie set for what American contentment should look like. Streets lined with old elms and maples, houses with front porches and actual rocking chairs that people actually used. The kind of place where the smell of pine trees after rain mixed with wood smoke from chimneys, where you could hear the wind moving through the mountains if you stopped and listened. I'd chosen this place specifically after I left the service. After years of surveillance in Kandahar and threat assessment in places where showing your face could get you killed. I wanted boring. I wanted predictable. I wanted a life where the biggest drama was whether the Hendersons next door would repaint their fence this year. Megan had wanted it too, or she'd said she did. She'd been working at a marketing firm in Denver, commuting 2 hours each way, and when the job at Northstone Developments opened up right here in Ashwood, she'd actually cried with relief. "No more highway stress," she'd said, wrapped in my arms. "Just 10 minutes to work, home for dinner every night, time to actually live our life together." That's what made it all worse somehow. We'd built this quiet, careful life together, and she was systematically dismantling it with lies that got more elaborate each week. My workshop became my sanctuary during those weeks of suspicion. I'd bought this property specifically because it had a detached 2-car garage that I could convert into a proper space for my work. Contracting in the security sector paid well, but what I really loved was working with my hands. The garage smelled like machine oil, cut metal, and sawdust. Everything had its place. Tools hung on pegboard walls outlined in marker so I'd know instantly if something was missing. The workbench was solid maple, built to last a century. In the corner sat my current project, a 1970 Triumph motorcycle I was restoring, its engine spread out in carefully organized pieces. I'd spent 10 years in military intelligence, learning how to take chaos and turn it into data, data into patterns, patterns into actionable intelligence. Civilian life was supposed to be different, quieter. But here I was again, watching my wife like she was a surveillance target, cataloging her lies like I was building a case file. And I hated it. God, I hated it. But I couldn't stop. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. Megan was curled up on the couch, supposedly reading email on her phone, when it buzzed with a notification. She was in the bathroom, had left it on the cushion next to me. I wasn't trying to snoop. The screen just lit up, and there it was, a preview of a text message floating across the lock screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible. DH. My heart didn't race. It didn't pound. It did. Something worse. It went completely still, like my body had decided that if it just stopped moving, maybe this moment would pass without becoming real. I picked up the phone carefully, like it might explode, and when Megan came back, I held it out to her. You got a message, I said, and my voice sounded normal, maybe even friendly. Looks important. She took it, glanced at the screen, and I watched her pupils dilate just slightly. Watched the micro-expression flash across her face. Fear, then calculation, then a forced casualness that almost looked convincing. Almost. Oh, that's just Derek from work, she said, already typing a response. We've got this huge project due Friday. Everyone's been working crazy hours. He's probably talking about finally getting through the presentation prep. At night, I asked, still in that same mild, interested tone. Yeah, we worked late yesterday. I told you, remember? Didn't get home until almost midnight. She had told me, and I'd believed her because I'd wanted to believe her, because the alternative meant that the life I'd built, the peace I'd fought for, was as real as a mirage in the desert. Right, I said. Hope the presentation goes well. She kissed my forehead and I let her, even though her lips felt like they belonged to a stranger wearing Megan's face. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, I went to my workshop and sat in the dark for 3 hours thinking. The thing about intelligence work is that once you start really looking, you can't unsee what you find. I'd been trying to ignore the data, hoping I was wrong, praying this was just some paranoid delusion left over from too many years of assuming everyone was lying about everything. But I wasn't wrong. I knew I wasn't wrong. So I stopped hoping and started working. We had a family phone plan, one of those deals where you get a better rate for multiple lines. What Megan didn't know, because I'd never mentioned it and she'd never asked, was that the account was in my name, and I had administrative access to every feature, including the one that lets you track your phone's location for safety and security purposes. I activated it for her phone at 2 a.m, sitting in my workshop with my laptop balanced on the workbench next to a half-disassembled carburetor. The little blue dot appeared on the map right where it should be, in our bedroom, where she was sleeping 10 feet away from me, or would be if she knew I was out here. Then I went back through the location history. The app kept 30 days of data. The first few days looked normal. Home to office, office to home, occasional stops at the grocery store or the gym. But then I started matching the locations to what she'd told me she was doing, and the map became a geography of lies. 2 Wednesdays ago, she'd said she had a late meeting that went until 9. The blue dot showed her at Rosario's, an Italian place 40 minutes away on the far side of Thornton. She'd been there from 6:30 until 10:15. Last Friday, she'd told me she was driving out to meet with a vendor in Boulder, would be gone most of the day. The blue dot never left Ashwood. Instead, it sat for 4 hours at the Pinewood Lodge, a boutique hotel near the airport that marketed itself as discreet luxury for the discerning traveler. I made a spreadsheet. Date, time, what she said, where she actually was, 3 weeks of data, 14 lies, 7 trips to that hotel. The nausea hit me around dawn, and I barely made it to the utility sink before I threw up. Not from the betrayal itself. I'd already gone cold inside, already moved past the emotion and into operational mode. No, I was sick because of what this meant about the woman I'd married. She looked me in the eye and lied smoothly, confidently, repeatedly. She'd kissed me goodbye before going to meet him. She'd come home and climbed into our bed and let me hold her with his cologne, probably still on her skin. Who was she? Because she wasn't Megan. My Megan couldn't have done this, except she wasn't my Megan anymore. Maybe she'd never been. I slept for 2 hours in my truck, parked in my own driveway because I couldn't make myself go back into that house yet. When I finally did go inside, Megan was up, making coffee, humming some song I didn't recognize. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't carrying on a whole secret life behind those pretty eyes. "Morning, handsome," she said, and I wondered how she did it, how she made her voice sound so genuine, so warm, when she was simultaneously planning her next lie. "Morning," I managed, and I took the coffee she offered, even though I wanted to throw it against the wall, just to see something break, to make the outside world match what had shattered inside me. I called in sick to work. Then I called Glenn Marshall, who'd been my friend since I transitioned out of the military and into civilian contracting. Glenn had gone to law school instead of re-upping, specialized in family law, and had helped me understand things like mortgage applications and property taxes when I bought this place. He was also the first person to tell me that civilian life wasn't easier than deployment, just different, and that the skills that kept you alive overseas could destroy your relationships at home if you weren't careful. "I need a consultation," I told him. "Extraction operation." Glenn knew me well enough to hear what I wasn't saying. "Your place or mine?" "Yours, I'll be there in 30. Glenn's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, all exposed brick and renovated hardwood. His conference room had a door that closed and windows that faced a courtyard instead of the street. Private, secure. The kind of place where you could lay out evidence of your life falling apart without worrying about who might overhear. I brought my laptop, my phone, and a manila folder containing printed screenshots and location maps. Glenn took one, looked at my face and poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the bottle he kept in his desk drawer. "It's not even 9 in the morning," I said. "I know what time it is. Drink." I drank. Then I showed him everything. He went through it methodically, asking questions, making notes in his neat lawyer handwriting. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me with something that might have been pity if Glenn was the kind of man who pitied anyone. "This is solid documentation," he said. "More than solid. If you want a divorce, you'll get one, and on favorable terms. Colorado's a no-fault state, so technically the adultery doesn't matter for the legal dissolution, but it matters a hell of a lot when we're dividing assets and negotiating settlements. You documented everything correctly, didn't obtain any of this through illegal means. It's all admissible." "Good, Antoine," I said, and my voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere far away. "Alex." Glenn waited until I looked at him. "I need to know you're not going to do something stupid. I know how you're wired. I know what you're capable of when you decide someone's a threat. But this isn't Afghanistan. This isn't even a security contract. This is your wife and some jackass from her office. The law will handle this, but only if you let it." "I'm not going to kill anyone, Glenn. That's not what worries me. I'm worried you're going to go into operator mode and forget that you're human. I've seen what happens when guys like you decide to run a personal operation. You'll win, but you'll lose yourself in the process." I thought about that, about the cold, analytical distance I'd felt while making that spreadsheet, the way I'd labeled my wife's lies with timestamps and GPS coordinates, the way I'd stopped feeling angry and started feeling nothing at all. "What if I've already lost myself?" I asked. Glenn refilled both glasses. "Then we make sure you find yourself again when this is over. But first, we're going to do this right. Legal, clean, and final. I'm going to draft divorce papers. You're going to gather any additional financial documentation you need. And you're not going to confront her, not going to threaten him, not going to do anything except continue being the husband she thinks you are until we're ready to move." "I can do that," I said, and I meant it. Patience was part of the training. You don't blow your position until you have everything you need for a successful operation. "One more thing," Glenn said. "You need to know who he is. DH from her office. You need a name and face before we proceed." I'd been avoiding that part, I realized. As long as he was just initials on a text message, he wasn't quite real. But Glenn was right. Know your enemy. Basic tactical principle. "I'll find out," I said. It took me less than an hour. North Stone Developments had a company website with a Our Team page featuring photos and bios of all their senior staff. I scrolled through project managers, Engineers, administrative coordinators, until I found him. Derek Holt, director of development, 42 years old. That smile that probably made middle-aged women in the office think about doing stupid things. In his bio photo, he was wearing a suit that cost more than my motorcycle, and on his wrist was one of those watches that screams, "I'm successful and I want you to know it." His bio mentioned his dedication to innovative projects and his commitment to building lasting partnerships. I bet he was committed to building partnerships. I wondered how many of them he'd built in the Pinewood Lodge. I scrolled down to his social media links, clicked through to his Facebook page. There she was in the banner image. Derek with his arm around a blonde woman and two teenage kids, all of them smiling in front of what looked like a ski lodge. Caption, "Family is everything." Right, everything except when you're screwing project coordinators in hotel rooms. I took a screenshot of his bio page, his social media profile, everything. Then I spent the rest of that afternoon doing what I did best, reconnaissance. I drove to Northstone Developments, that glass and steel monument to modern commercial architecture on the edge of Ashwood's small downtown. Their parking lot was 3/4 full, Megan's Subaru in her usual spot near the side entrance. I parked across the street in a public lot, settled in, and waited. At 12:15, they came out together, Megan and Derek walking side by side to his black BMW. No touching in public, nothing obvious, but the body language told me everything. The way she angled toward him, the way he leaned in when he talked to her, the way they both laughed at something, and it was that fake laugh again, the one that made my teeth ache. They drove separately to a Thai place downtown, parked, and went inside together. Through the window, I watched them take a booth in the back corner, watched him reach across the table and touch her hand, watched her let him. I took photos, not because I needed more evidence. Glenn had already said what I had was sufficient, but because I needed to see it, to make it real, to kill whatever small part of me was still hoping this was all some horrible misunderstanding. They stayed for an hour and a half. When they came back out, Megan was smiling that 100-watt smile, the one she used to give me, and Derek's hand rested on the small of her back as they walked to their cars. The touch lingered just a half-second too long, and I watched my wife look up at this man with an expression I'd thought was reserved for me. Something in my chest cracked, but it didn't break open. It just went numb. That night, Megan came home and kissed me hello like she always did. "How was your day?" she asked, kicking off her heels. "Quiet," I said. "Got some work done in the shop. How was yours?" "Oh God, exhausting. We had this terrible meeting that went through lunch. Derek was being such a perfectionist about the new development timeline. I barely got to eat anything." She rolled her eyes, making it a performance, an inside joke about difficult bosses that I was supposed to commiserate with. I looked at her standing in our kitchen, lying to my face with a smile, and I wondered when she'd gotten so good at it. Or maybe she'd always been this good, and I just never had a reason to look close enough to notice. "That sounds frustrating," I said, matching her tone. "You must be starving." "I am. Should we order something? I'm too tired to cook." We ordered Thai food. I watched her eat pad Thai from the same restaurant where she'd had lunch with Derek, watched her tell me about her terrible day while carefully editing out every moment that mattered. She was good, really good. If I hadn't already known the truth, I might have believed every word. After dinner, she curled up on the couch with her laptop, catching up on emails. Her phone was face down on the cushion next to her, and every few minutes it would light up with a notification she'd immediately check, that performative laugh bursting out of her throat like something trying to escape. I went to my workshop and started building a wooden box. I didn't know what I was going to put in it yet, but my hands needed to do something, needed to shape something from nothing, needed to prove that I could still create, even while my marriage was being destroyed. The smell of fresh-cut pine and the rhythm of the saw and sander gave me something to focus on, besides the woman in my house who'd stopped being my wife somewhere along the way. Around midnight, Megan came to the door of the workshop. "You coming to bed?" "Soon," I said, not looking up from the piece I was sanding. "Just want to finish this part." She came up behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist, rested her head against my back. The same gesture she'd done 1,000 times before, but her perfume smelled wrong, and her touch felt like lies, and I had to work not to flinch away. "I love you," she said into my shirt. I closed my eyes and wondered if she even knew what those words meant anymore. "Love you too," I said, and added it to the list of lies we were telling each other. The next afternoon, Megan announced she had to go to Denver for an overnight business trip. "Last minute thing," she said, already packing her small overnight bag. "There's some issue with one of our suppliers, and Derek thinks I should go meet with them face to face. Leaving in about an hour, should be back tomorrow evening." "That's sudden," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I know, I'm sorry. But it's important, and honestly, Derek specifically requested I go. He says I have the best rapport with these guys." She was already mentally gone, moving through the motions of packing on autopilot, checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. "Well, good luck," I said. "Drive safe." She kissed me goodbye, promised to call from the hotel, and left in a swirl of that wrong. Perfume and false promises. I waited 15 minutes. Then I went to my workshop and opened the locked drawer in my workbench where I kept certain items from my previous life. The voice-activated audio recorder was about the size of a pack of gum, with a battery that lasted 48 hours and memory that could store 30 hours of clear audio. I'd used devices like this in places where being caught with recording equipment could get you killed. Using it on my wife's car felt both ridiculous and inevitable. I drove to the Northstone parking lot. Her Subaru was still there, which meant she hadn't left yet. The lot was mostly empty. After 5 on a Friday, most people had already fled for the weekend. I used my keys to pop her rear passenger door. We'd had each other's spare keys since we got married. And slipped the recorder under the driver's seat, magnetic mount securing it to the metal frame. In and out in under 30 seconds. Old habits. Then I went home and waited. The recorder was voice-activated, so it would only save audio when people were actually talking. I'd placed it carefully enough that it should pick up conversation in the car without too much road noise interference. Professional placement, clean execution. I'd done this before, just never to someone I'd promised to love for better or worse. That night, sitting alone in the house we'd built together, I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and tried to read. Gave up after realizing I'd been staring at the same page for 20 minutes. Tried watching something on TV. Couldn't tell you what it was 30 seconds after I turned it off. Finally, I went to my workshop and worked on the motorcycle until my hands were black with grease and my mind was too tired to think about what was happening in Denver. Megan called around 9. "Hey, honey, just got to the hotel. Long drive, but I'm here safe. About to grab some dinner and crash. Love you. Talk tomorrow." "Love you too," I said to the stranger on the phone who sounded like my wife. I didn't sleep that night, just lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house settle and creak around me, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt deployed in hostile territory. The next day crawled past like something wounded. I cleaned the house, changed the oil in my truck, reorganized my workshop. Normal Saturday tasks done by a man whose life was quietly imploding. I kept checking my phone for the little blue dot on the map. It never went to Denver. It went to the Pinewood Lodge and stayed there for 14 hours. Megan came home Sunday evening, tired but cheerful, carrying a small gift bag. "Got you something," she said, handing it over. Inside was a Denver Broncos keychain, the kind of tourist gift you grab at a gas station on your way out of town. "Thanks," I said, turning it over in my hands. A trinket to commemorate a trip that never happened, bought probably on her way back from the hotel to make her lie look more convincing. "How was your weekend?" she asked, already heading to the bedroom to unpack. "Quiet. Worked on the bike. You?" "Exhausting. The supplier meeting ran long. Then we had dinner. Then more meetings this morning. But I think we got everything sorted out." She was good, so good, looking me right in the eye while inventing her entire weekend. I nodded along, made interested noises, played my part. Monday morning, after Megan left for work, I retrieved the recorder from her car. My hands were shaking as I connected it to my laptop in the workshop, and I hated that they were shaking, hated that after everything I'd already confirmed, I could still be nervous about what I was going to hear. I put on headphones, opened the audio file, and pressed play. The first 20 minutes were just road noise and radio, Megan humming along to songs, nothing useful. Then her phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. "Hey, beautiful, you on your way?" Derek's voice, smooth and intimate. Yeah, just hit the highway. Should be there in about 40 minutes. That was Megan's voice, but different. Lighter, younger, the way she used to sound when we first started dating. Perfect. I got us the same room as last time. Already checked in. You're terrible, she said, but she was laughing, that real laugh I hadn't heard in months. What if someone from the office sees your car there? That's why I parked in the back lot, genius. Plus, everyone thinks you're in Denver and I'm at my sister's place in Boulder. We're covered. God, this is so complicated sometimes. Worth it though, right? His voice dropped lower. Friday nights with you are the best part of my week. Stop it. You're going to make me blush before I even get there. They kept talking like that, intimate and easy, until she arrived at the hotel. The audio picked up the sound of her car door, her footsteps, then cut out as she walked away from the vehicle. The next recording started Saturday afternoon. The car door opening, both of them getting in, him in the passenger seat. I feel like we barely got out of bed, Megan said, laughing. Why would we want to? Besides, you said you needed to be back by Sunday evening. I'm making the most of the time we have. Alex texted asking if my meeting was going okay. I told him it was running long. How's he doing with all this? Derek asked. And there was something in his voice I couldn't quite identify. Curiosity, guilt, amusement. He's fine. He doesn't suspect anything. He trusts me completely. Megan's voice was matter-of-fact, almost dismissive. He's so predictable. Still thinks I'm really working late when I say I am. Still believes every business trip. It's kind of sad, actually. My hands clenched on the desk hard enough to make my knuckles white. Sad? Derek laughed. That's one word for it. I don't mean sad like pathetic. Just sad that he's so trusting. He's a good guy, Alex. He doesn't deserve this. She said it like she was commenting on the weather, like my pain was an abstract concept that didn't really touch her. So why are you doing it? Derek asked. And now I could identify his tone. He was testing her, seeing how committed she was to whatever this was. Because you make me feel alive, Megan said, and her voice dropped into that intimate register she used to reserve for me. When I'm with you, I remember what it's like to be excited about something. He's steady. He's reliable. He's there every single day doing the same things, being the same person. And God, that was what I wanted when we moved here. But now it feels like living in a museum, like I'm trapped being the person I was instead of the person I could be. And who could you be? Derek asked, playing along with her fantasy. Someone interesting, someone who takes risks, someone who people notice. They kept talking, mapping out their careful deception, making plans for the next time they could get away. At one point, Derek mentioned his wife, joking about how she'd completely bought his story about helping his sister renovate her kitchen. We're terrible people, Megan said, but she was laughing. We're people who deserve to be happy, Derek corrected. Life's too short to be stuck in marriages that don't work anymore. Does yours not work? It works fine. It's just boring, like yours. Alex isn't boring. He's just predictable. Same thing, sweetheart. The audio went on, but I stopped listening, stopped hearing their words. I sat in my workshop with those headphones on, and something inside me that had been barely holding together finally, quietly, completely broke apart. Not broke open. That would have been a release, would have meant tears or rage or throwing things. No, this was different. This was every soft part of me hardening, every warm place going cold, every piece of hope I'd been clutching transforming into something dense and final. She thought I was predictable, thought I was boring, thought I was sad in my trustingness, like my faith in her was some character flaw instead of a choice I'd made every single day to believe in us. And she'd said it while laughing, while wrapped up in a hotel room with a man who called his own wife boring, who was using my wife the same way my wife was using me, using our marriage as something to escape from instead of return to. I took off the headphones and sat in the silence of my workshop for a long time. The motorcycle engine was still in pieces on my workbench. The wooden box I'd made was sitting in the corner, waiting for a purpose. Everything in here was half finished, waiting for me to come back and complete it. But I was done waiting. I called Glenn. I need to move. Now. What happened? I got proof. Audio. You need to hear it. He came over that evening after Megan had gone to bed, claiming she was exhausted from her business trip. We sat in my workshop, and I played him selected sections of the recording. His face went hard, professional, but I saw anger flash in his eyes when Megan called me predictable and sad. "This is more than sufficient," he said when I stopped the playback. "Actually, it's probably more than we need. When do you want to file?" "Tomorrow." "Alex, we should plan this out. Figure out the optimal time to serve papers, coordinate everything." "No, tomorrow. I'm done living in this lie." Glenn studied me in that careful way lawyers study hostile witnesses. "What are you planning?" "Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just honest. For the first time in months, I'm going to be completely honest. That makes me nervous. It should make her nervous. I've been playing her game, pretending I don't know, being the predictable husband she thinks I am. But that ends tomorrow. Tomorrow she finds out exactly who I really am." Glenn left around midnight with instructions to have papers drawn up first thing Monday morning. I sat in my workshop until dawn, not working on anything, just sitting in the dark, feeling the weight of 8 years together turning into something I'd have to pack away and store, like old tools I'd never use again. Monday morning, I made coffee for both of us like always. Megan came down in her work clothes, already distracted by her phone, and I handed her a mug with precisely the amount of cream she liked. She kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, and I let her, wondering if she could taste the lie in my stillness. "I've got a meeting first thing," she said, scrolling through messages. "Might be a late one tonight. New project kicking off. Don't wait up." "I won't," I said, and meant it. After she left, I went to my workshop and made copies of everything. The GPS data, the photographs, the audio recordings. Glenn had everything he needed for the legal case, but I had something else in mind. That afternoon, I left work early and drove to North Stone Developments. I waited in my truck until I saw Derek's black BMW pull into the lot around 4:30. He parked in his reserved spot, of course he had a reserved spot, and headed toward the entrance, already on his phone, probably texting my wife about when they could next sneak away. I got out of my truck and walked across the lot. "Derek Holt?" He turned, squinting at me in the afternoon sun. "Yeah?" "Alex Rhodes." I didn't offer my hand. "We need to talk." I watched recognition flicker across his face, watched him quickly rearrange his expression into polite confusion. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "I'm Megan's husband." I said it flatly without emotion and watched his face go through several interesting changes. "We should talk privately. You don't want to have this conversation here." He looked around the parking lot, calculating odds, trying to figure out if I was dangerous. Finally, he nodded. "My car." We got into his BMW. Leather interior, that new car smell he probably paid extra for, and sat in expensive silence for a moment. Derek's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "Before you say anything," he started, and I could almost admire how quickly he pivoted to offense. "Nothing has happened between Megan and me that crosses any professional—" "Stop!" I pulled out my phone, opened the audio file, and played just 10 seconds. Derek's voice saying, "Same room as last time," and Megan laughing. I stopped it. Derek's face went pale. "Where did you—" "I'm a security contractor. I spent 5 years in military intelligence. Did you really think you were cleverer than me?" I kept my voice conversational, almost friendly. It had more impact that way. "I know about the Pinewood Lodge. I know about every time she said she was working late, or going to Denver, or meeting with vendors. I have GPS data, photographs, audio recordings. I have enough evidence to bury both of you. Look, I don't know what you think you know." I played another clip. Megan's voice saying he doesn't suspect anything. He trusts me completely. Derek stopped talking. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, handed it to him. "In there, you'll find printouts of your text messages to my wife, which I obtained legally through our shared phone plan. Photos of you two at lunch, transcripts of selected portions of your conversations, maps showing your trips to various hotels over the past 3 months." He opened the envelope with shaking hands, flipped through the contents, and I watched him realize how completely he'd been caught. "What do you want?" he finally asked. And there it was, the shift from denial to negotiation. "Megan's going to be fired from North Stone. Today. You're going to call her tonight and tell her that due to unexpected budget cuts and restructuring, her position is being eliminated. You'll offer her 2 weeks severance, which is generous considering you've been using company time to commit adultery. She can accept it gracefully and leave quietly, or she can make a fuss, in which case I send copies of everything in that envelope to your wife, your HR department, and Northstone's board of directors. You can't. I absolutely can. And I will. Your company has a strict fraternization policy for managers and subordinates. I checked. You're in a position of authority over her. This will end your career here. As for your wife, I pulled out my phone again, showed him the screenshots from his Facebook page, all those happy family photos. I'm sure she'd be very interested to know how you spend your Friday nights. Derek was sweating now, his fancy watch catching the light as his hands trembled. This is blackmail. No, this is a choice. You can lose your job, your marriage, and your reputation, or you can lose one employee who was never going to leave her husband for you anyway. What's it going to be? He stared at me, and I stared back, letting him see exactly how cold I could be. Finally, he nodded. She'll be gone by end of week, he said quietly. Tonight, Derek. You call her tonight. And one more thing. I leaned in slightly. If you ever contact her again, for any reason, everything goes public. I don't care if it's 6 months from now or 6 years. I'll be watching, and I'll know. Do you understand? Yeah, he whispered. I understand. I got out of his car and walked back to my truck. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I'd executed the operation exactly as planned, and now all that was left was the aftermath. That evening, I made dinner. Chicken parmesan, one of Megan's favorites. I set the table nicely, even lit candles. When she came home around 7, looking tired and distracted, she blinked in surprise at the setup. What's all this? She asked, but she was smiling, probably relieved that I wasn't asking about her day or noticing how late she'd stayed. Just felt like doing something nice, I said. We haven't had a real dinner together in a while. We ate, making small talk about nothing important. She told me about her day, carefully edited version, and I nodded along. After dinner, we moved to the living room with wine. Megan curled up on the couch, finally relaxing, her phone next to her as always. Then it rang. Derek's name on the screen. She glanced at it, then at me. Sorry, I should take this. Work thing. Of course, I said. She stepped into the kitchen, and I heard her say, "What's wrong?" in that concerned professional voice. Then silence. Then what? Wait, you're joking. Derek, this isn't funny. Her voice was rising, panic creeping in. But I just got a promotion last month. You can't. The conversation went on for maybe 5 minutes, her voice getting higher and more desperate. When she came back to the living room, her face was splotchy, eyes wet with shocked tears. I just got fired, she said, like she couldn't quite believe the words coming out of her mouth. Budget cuts. Position eliminated. They're giving me 2 weeks severance, and I have to clear out my desk by Friday. Oh my God, I said, standing up, moving toward her. Meg, I'm so sorry. What happened? I don't know. Derek said it came from upper management, some restructuring plan, but I don't understand. Everything was fine. I was doing good work. She was crying now, real tears, and she looked so lost that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Hey, it's okay, I said, pulling her into a hug. We'll figure it out. You'll find something else. This isn't the end of the world. She cried into my shoulder and I held her, and I wondered if she had any idea that her world was about to get so much worse. The next day I came home from work to find Megan sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, surrounded by printed resumes and job listings. She looked up when I walked in, and her smile was fragile. I've been applying all day, she said. Already sent out like 15 applications. Someone will want to interview me, right? I have good experience, good references. I'm sure they will, I said, and thought about how those references were going to go when her former employer was asked why she left. That evening after dinner, after she'd talked herself into believing this was just a temporary setback, after she'd convinced herself everything would be fine, I went to my workshop and brought back a folder. Hey, I said, sitting down across from her at the dining table. I need to talk to you about something. She looked up from her laptop, probably expecting me to offer encouragement or advice about her job search, Or maybe just a sympathetic ear. Instead, I opened the folder and pulled out the top sheet. The GPS map with her car's movements plotted in blue. The Pinewood Lodge marked with a red star. I placed it on the table between us. Megan looked down at it, looked back up at me. "What is this?" I pulled out the next page. A photo of her and Derek at lunch, his hand on her back. Then another. Them getting out of his car at the hotel. Then transcripts of selected portions of the audio recordings. I watched her face cycle through confusion, to recognition, to horror, to something that might have been calculation, already trying to figure out how to explain this away. "Alex, I know everything," I said, and my voice was calm as still water. "I've known for weeks. I have GPS data showing every time you lied about where you were. I have recordings of your conversations with Derek. I have photographs. I have everything." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She just sat there, staring at the evidence of her betrayal spread across our dining table. "I need you to listen very carefully," I continued, still in that same calm voice. "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to lose my temper. I'm just going to tell you the truth, maybe for the first time in months, and you're going to hear it. Can you do that?" She nodded, tears already streaming down her face. "You destroyed our marriage, not the sex with Derek. That's just the symptom. You destroyed it every time you looked me in the eye and lied. Every time you came home from his bed and climbed into ours. Every time you let me hold you while you were planning your next betrayal. You called me predictable, boring, said it was sad how much I trusted you." I watched her flinch at her own words played back to her. "You're right. It was sad, but not because I trusted you. It was sad because you became the kind of person who would take that trust and turn it into a joke." "Alex, please, I can explain." "No, you can't. There's no explanation that makes this okay. No excuse that erases what you did. You made choices, Megan. Hundreds of them. Every lie was a choice. Every secret meeting was a choice. Every time you laughed with him about how clueless I was, that was a choice. And I'm making a choice now, too." I pulled out the last document in the folder. Divorce papers, already drawn up, ready for my signature. "Glenn filed these this morning," I said. "You're going to be served officially tomorrow. Colorado's a no-fault state, so your affair doesn't technically matter for the legal proceedings, but it matters for everything else. The house is in my name. You'll remember, we bought it before we got married, and I used my VA loan. You're entitled to nothing from the equity. Our cars are separately owned. We don't have kids, thank God, so this should be clean and quick." Megan was sobbing now, reaching for my hands across the table. "Please don't do this. Alex, please. I made a mistake. I know I did. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can..." "Fix what?" I pulled my hands back. "You didn't break something, Meg. You destroyed it. You took 8 years of my life and turned them into a lie. You took my trust and made it into a weapon to hurt me with. And you did it all while smiling and kissing me goodnight and telling me you loved me. So no, we can't fix this, because there's nothing left to fix. Where am I supposed to go?" Her voice was small, desperate. "I just lost my job. I don't have anywhere." "That's not my problem anymore," I said, and watched her realize I meant it. "You have 2 weeks before I need you out of this house. That should give you time to find an apartment or move in with family. Or maybe Derek can help you out, since he seems so good at making you feel alive." "Alex, you're not this person. You're not this cold. I know you. You're good. You don't." "You don't know me," I interrupted. "You know the man I was trying to be. The civilian, the peaceful husband. But that man trusted his wife, and his wife destroyed him. What's left is the person I was before, the one I tried to leave behind when I married you. And this person doesn't forgive betrayal. This person completes the mission and moves on." I stood up, leaving the divorce papers and all the evidence on the table. "I'll sleep in the guest room. You can stay in the master bedroom for now. We'll divide things up as civilly as possible over the next 2 weeks. But we're done, Meg. We're completely done." I walked to my workshop and didn't look back. Behind me, I heard her collapse into sobs that sounded like something dying, and maybe something was dying. The version of Megan who'd thought she could have everything, who'd thought I'd never find out, who'd thought predictable and boring meant she could treat me however she wanted without consequences. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. Megan moved through the house like a ghost, trying to talk to me, trying to explain, trying to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I was polite but distant, treating her like a roommate whose lease was running out. I didn't engage with her attempts at reconciliation, didn't respond to her tears, didn't let her back into any space where she could hurt me again. Derek apparently had completely cut her off, blocked her number, refused to see her, probably too afraid that I'd follow through on my threat. She'd lost her job, her lover, and her marriage in the span of 48 hours, and I felt nothing watching her fall apart except a distant curiosity about how she'd thought this would end. Glenn pushed the divorce through with frightening efficiency. Megan signed everything without contest. What choice did she have? Her lawyer took one look at the evidence I'd compiled and advised her to take whatever offer I was willing to give, which was fair but final. I'd keep the house, she'd keep her car, we'd split our small savings account evenly. No alimony, no ongoing connection, just a clean break and separate paths forward. On her last day in the house, I helped her load boxes into a moving truck. She'd found a small apartment across town, something cheap and temporary, while she looked for a new job. She kept trying to make eye contact, to get me to acknowledge some shared history, some remaining connection. "I really did love you," she said at one point, carrying a box of kitchen stuff she'd claimed. "Maybe you did," I acknowledged, "but not enough. Not enough to matter." She drove away and I closed the door and stood in the sudden quiet of my house. Our house. My house. The silence felt different this time. Not empty. Clean. The next month I put the house on the market. It sold fast. Good bones, nice neighborhood, motivated seller. I took the profit and bought 20 acres at the base of the mountains, 40 minutes outside Ashwood. The property came with a small cabin that needed work and a 3-car garage that was in better shape than the residence. Perfect. I spent 3 months converting that garage into a proper workshop, added south-facing windows for natural light, installed a wood stove for heat, built custom storage for all my tools. The cabin I'd fix up eventually, but the shop was the priority. This was where I'd live, really live, not just exist. I moved my motorcycle and started working on it again, this time with actual focus. Finished the engine rebuild, got the electrical sorted, rebuilt the carburetor. Every evening I'd work until my hands were too tired to hold tools. Then I'd sit in the doorway of my shop, looking out at the mountains and feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, not happiness. That would come later maybe. But peace, the kind that comes from living honestly, from not having to wonder if the person you're sleeping next to is lying to you, from knowing exactly who you are and what you'll tolerate. I'd been in my new place about 4 months when Glenn called. "You need to know something," he said. "Megan's been asking around about you, where you moved, how to contact you. And I told her you made it very clear you don't want contact, but I'm giving you the heads up in case she shows up." She showed up on a Tuesday evening, just as winter was starting to think about becoming spring. I heard a car coming up my long driveway. You could hear vehicles from a mile away out here, which was one of the things I liked about it. And by the time she pulled up to my shop, I was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting. She got out of her car, and I almost didn't recognize her. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by discount store jeans and a jacket that had seen better days. No makeup, hair in a simple ponytail. She looked 10 years older and infinitely more tired. "How'd you find this place?" I asked. "I hired someone. Don't worry, it cost me everything I had left." She tried for a smile, but it died halfway across her face. "Can I talk to you, please? Just for a minute?" Every instinct told me to say no, to send her away, to maintain the clean boundary I'd built between my old life and my new one. But I was curious, in the same way you're curious about a car crash you pass on the highway. "You've got 5 minutes," I said, not moving from the doorway. She walked closer, and I saw she'd been crying, recently and probably often. "I lost everything," she said, like I hadn't figured that out. "The apartment, my savings, my car got repossessed. I'm staying with my sister in Kansas right now, but I can't afford to keep paying her rent, and I don't know what to do." Still not my problem, I said. I know. I know it's not. But I need you to know I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. I destroyed the best thing in my life, and I did it for someone who didn't even care about me. Derek won't even acknowledge I exist now. He used me and threw me away, and I let him because I was stupid and selfish, and I needed to feel special. You were special, I said. To me. That wasn't enough for you. I know that now. God, Alex, I know. I wake up every day knowing what I lost, and it's killing me. Please, please, can we try again? I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll work whatever job. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Just please, don't leave me like this. I looked at her standing in front of my shop, broken and desperate, and finally understanding the cost of what she'd done. Part of me, some tiny part, felt sorry for her. She looked like someone who'd gambled everything on a bad hand and lost. But the larger part of me, the part that had spent months rebuilding myself from the wreckage of her lies, felt nothing but a distant finality. No, I said simply. Please. Megan, listen to me. Really listen. You didn't just cheat on me. You laughed about how stupid I was for trusting you. You called me boring and predictable and sad. You took everything I gave you, my faith, my love, my loyalty, and you mocked it. You didn't just break my heart. You tried to break who I am as a person, and you don't come back from that. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant every word, and maybe you regret it now that it cost you everything. But that regret isn't real change, Meg. It's just consequences catching up to choices. You want me back because you're alone and scared and broke, not because you actually want me. You want what I represented: stability, security, someone who'll clean up your messes and forgive you for making them. Tears were streaming down her face. That's not true. I love you. I still love you. Maybe you do, in your way, but it's not enough. It never was. Because love without respect is just need, and I'm not going to spend my life being needed by someone who doesn't respect me enough to be honest with me. So that's it? Her voice cracked. You're just done? After 8 years, you can just walk away and not look back? I did look back. I looked back at every lie, every secret meeting, every time you chose him over me. I looked back at all of it, and you know what I saw? Someone who didn't deserve what I was offering. So yes, I'm done. Completely done. I started to close the door and she surged forward, grabbing the edge. Alex, please, I have nothing. No job, no money, nowhere to go. I'm begging you. I stopped and looked at her hand on my door, then at her face. You had me. You had a home, a husband who loved you, a life most people would kill for. You had everything, and you chose to risk it for someone who was using you for entertainment. Those were your choices, and these are your consequences. I'm not rescuing you from them. I gently removed her hand from the door. Go back to your sisters. Figure out your life. Get help if you need it. But do it without me. I'm not your safety net anymore. I made a mistake, she screamed as I shut the door. Everyone makes mistakes. You're supposed to forgive people. That's what love means. I locked the door and stood there listening to her cry on the other side of it. Listened to her plead and bargain and beg. It went on for maybe 10 minutes before she finally gave up, got in her car, and drove away. I went back to my workbench where I'd been hand finishing a knife handle, sat down and picked up my tools. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. Outside, the last of the daylight was fading behind the mountains, and in the shop's warm light, I kept working. Forgiveness was for small mistakes, for human error, for people who owned what they'd done and genuinely tried to change. What Megan had done wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices made over months, and her only regret was getting caught and facing consequences. Some things you don't forgive. Some things you just survive, learn from, and walk away from. And that's what I'd done. Survived, learned, walked away. The knife handle felt good in my hand as I shaped it, the grain of the wood revealing itself under careful attention. Building something. That's what I was doing now. Not tearing down, not dwelling in ruins. Building. 6 months later, I ran into Derek at a hardware store in town. I was loading lumber into my truck when he came out carrying paint supplies. We saw each other at exactly the same moment, and I watched him consider running, then decide against it. "Alex," he said carefully. "Derek." We stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment. He looked older too, stressed. I wondered if his wife had found out, or if he was just carrying the weight of his choices. "I wanted to say," he started. "Don't," I interrupted. "There's nothing you can say that matters. You saw something you wanted, and you took it without caring who it hurt. That's who you are. Just do me one favor." "What?" "Next time you want something that belongs to someone else, remember that consequences are real, and some of us don't forgive." I got in my truck and drove away, leaving him standing there with his paint supplies and his guilt. Life got quieter after that. I worked my contracts, built things in my shop, finished restoring the motorcycle, started taking it out on long rides through the mountains, feeling the cold air and the engine's vibration, and the absolute freedom of being alone by choice instead of by betrayal. I dated eventually, casual things that didn't go anywhere, and that was fine. I wasn't looking for someone to complete me or fix me or fill some hole left by Megan. I was just living, fully and honestly, and if someone came along who fit that life, great. If not, also great. One Sunday afternoon, working in my shop with the doors open to let in the spring air, I realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking about Megan or Derek or any of it. The betrayal had become just another thing that happened, filed away with deployments and firefights and all the other shit you survive and move past. I wasn't happy in some ecstatic, movie ending kind of way, but I was content. I was building the life I wanted, one project at a time, without having to wonder if someone was destroying it behind my back. The motorcycle sold that summer to a collector in Wyoming who appreciated the restoration work. I made 3 times what I'd put into it and immediately started looking for the next project. Maybe a truck this time, or I'd finally get serious about that cabin renovation. Glenn stopped by one afternoon with beer and news. "Thought you'd want to know Megan's engaged. Guy she met through her sister, getting married in the fall." I took a long drink and looked out at my mountains. "Good for her. Everyone deserves a second chance. You're a better man than I am." "No," I said. "I'm just a man who knows that her happiness or unhappiness isn't my responsibility anymore. She's someone I used to know. That's all." And it was true. Megan Rhodes had become someone I used to know, a character in a story about who I used to be. The Alex who'd been betrayed and hurt and methodically dismantled his own life to escape a marriage built on lies. He was someone I used to be too. The person I was now built things, created things, lived honestly and openly and without apology. That person didn't carry grudges because grudges were just another kind of weight, and I'd shed enough weight already. That evening, I fired up the wood stove even though it wasn't quite cold enough to need it, just because I liked the smell and the sound of it. I pulled out fresh paper and started sketching plans for the cabin renovation. New windows, expanded kitchen, maybe a deck overlooking the valley. Projects, always projects. That's what life was now, a series of things to build, to improve, to make better. Not perfect, just better. And somewhere in the background, barely audible over the crackling fire and the wind in the pines, I could hear the echo of who I used to be saying goodbye to who I'd been. Grateful for the lessons and the scars, and the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for, and some things are only worth walking away from. I chose walking away, chose building something new over trying to resurrect something dead. And every day that choice felt more right, more true, more like exactly what I was supposed to be doing. The mountains stood quiet outside my windows, patient and permanent, and I sat in my shop surrounded by tools and wood and possibilities. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Not happy yet, but getting there, one project at a time.